Do you fail to get your dream trip planned because you are just overwhelmed by the details? In this video, we are going to take you through our pre-planning steps for our do-it-yourself DIY trip to Ireland. Although we are using Ireland for an example, the methodology we're going to talk about today can work for any dream or bucket list trip you want to plan for. This trip is getting closer, so it's time to share these pre-planning details with you. We have DIY planned several trips to Europe and have essentially used the same methodology as we're going to share with you here. We hope this video will inspire you to start planning your dream trip.
Welcome. We are Next Act Retirement and Travel. I'm Bob.
And I'm Sarah.
We are part-time retirees traveling part-time to experience the world. As you may recall, in our very first video we did, we told you we would be planning a trip to Ireland.
Most people have some dream trip they want to go on. We have a lot of places we want to go. So it gets a little bit hard to pick which trip to do when. In fact, we're struggling with that as we're looking towards the end of 2026 and into 2027. We're having discussions among ourselves about where do we want to go next after these next trips that we already have planned or are planning.
There are so many possibilities, Sarah.
There really are.
I guess what we're trying to say is it's really difficult picking your next trip. So I think we start first with, where do you want to go? What is the destination?
That is your first step. Ireland was always on our bucket list of places we wanted to go, but last year or a year and a half ago, in this time frame, I was doing a lot of research on the Irish side of my family. And after I had spent 6-8 months doing that, I was really like, we have to go to Ireland. We have to try to see someplace where my ancestors came from. At this point, I have to say, because of my research, I'll have to sort of put air quotes around Irish because I found out that my ancestors were really probably Scots-Irish and from Western Northern Ireland. Now that did impact where we wanted to go in Ireland, which we'll get into here pretty soon.
Another thing to look at is when to go. We researched the monthly average temperatures, whether there was a busy season to avoid, whether there was a shoulder season that we could take advantage of, and what would be the cost of lodging and flights at different times of the year.
We really did want to avoid the busiest and highest cost seasons for travel to Ireland. So we knew we were going to avoid June, July, and August. And so we focused in on September or October as a good target time to go to Ireland. We hoped that we could catch the shoulder season at that time and it wouldn't be so busy, but the weather would still be okay.
Ireland is not a hot weather climate. Even in the summer, the temperature averages in the 60s Fahrenheit. In the fall, we expect the temperature highs to be in the 50s and the lows to be in the 40s. Again, that's in Fahrenheit. And Sarah, it is Ireland, so we need to be prepared to expect rain at any time.
That's right. After we looked at all of that data, we still had to look at our personal calendars for work, family obligations, and community obligations. Sometimes it feels like you are threading the needle between all of those obligations to try to carve out a time to take a trip. In the end, you have to realize that something will probably have to give, that you will probably have to decide what obligation will not get your attention when you're gone on the trip. We can imagine that most of you who are still working or have children at home have the same difficulty in finding that time that you can set aside to take a trip. It is work. But our strategy has been for a good number of years so far is to plan really far ahead of time so that, even up to a year ahead of time, you have that time blocked out in your calendar and you know you'll be gone.
And so far, that strategy has worked for us just fine. Besides deciding when you want to go and where you want to go, you need to really focus and look at what is the scope of the trip.
This can be tricky. Some folks want to do it all. They want to do 5 countries, 3 large cities, all in a 1-week trip.
That's not us.
That is definitely not us. We know that we need a slower pace. So kind of tied to the scope issue is your pace and how long you want your trip to be.
Because of family, work, and community obligations, we're trying to limit our trips to 2 to 3 weeks each. Many of you can probably relate to this because if you're still working, you may only have a 1 to 2 week window of travel. Fortunately for us, though, we do have a little bit of flexibility to stretch that time a little bit farther.
We like our pace to be moderate with opportunities for rest when we need it. We have made no secret in these videos about being over 60. And we do need to moderate the time that we are standing and walking at one time or throughout the day.
We decided on a 2-week trip in country with a day on each end of travel to and from the airport. Our initial concept was to spend a week in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and to also spend a week in Dublin, Ireland. We are going to dig into that decision process a little bit more.
We're kind of going into a little bit of detail because I think this is kind of the part where people sort of get frozen or locked up and trying to do their own travel. But you need to continue to research all of these aspects we're talking about and push through. So let's look at the next ones. Next, you should think about your in-country logistics. Where are you going to fly in and out of? Where are you going to stay? And how are you going to get from place to place? These are maybe your next 3 steps, but although we're providing this kind of in a sequential order of steps, they sort of all work together. So those steps are going to go with the steps we were just talking about of where you're going, how fast and how long. You kind of have to research all of these steps all together in order to decide on the exact shape your trip is going to take that is best for you.
For Ireland, the where to fly in and out of is simple because Dublin was the only airport you can reach directly from the mainland US. If you're planning a trip to mainland Europe, you will have a lot of other options available to you. We did, however, look at different flights and what they may cost based on the times of year and the different departure airports. So, this is an example of how the flying logistics ties into the decision of when you take your trip.
We should mention at this point that we also wanted this trip, not asking too much here, but we also wanted this trip to be our budget trip of the year. We were planning to use our airline miles to buy our flight and hopefully use credit card points to do our hotels. This budget goal definitely figured in how we were going to do our trip and shape our trip to meet these goals. We'll go into that in just a little bit more detail now.
The how we would get around and where we would stay were definitely intertwined issues. A lot of people who go to Ireland rent a car and drive around because it's pretty rural country. We did not want to do that. Okay, we'll be honest. We didn't feel comfortable driving on the other side of the road, so we ruled that out. Although we would love to enjoy the rural parts of Ireland, we had to look at other options as to how to get there.
We looked at other options such as how dense were the train or bus systems. There seem to be trains between the major cities, but you would need to rely on buses to get to all of the smaller cities. Dragging ourselves and our luggage on and off buses or trains or whatever every 2 or 3 days in order to see a broad swath of the country just wasn't going to be for us either. We have done those trips before, and it's getting tougher and tougher.
For example, I really wanted to go to the village in Western Ireland where John Wayne's The Quiet Man was filmed. That is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I would love to have gone and seen where it was actually filmed. However, from a logistical standpoint, in order to do that, it would have cut 4 days out of our trip. So we did, both of us, made the difficult decision that that is something that just won't fit into this trip. You have to sometimes make tough choices when you're planning where you want to go and what you want to do.
That is tough, because whenever you're thinking about a new place to go or explore, you want to see everything. But realize you will have to make choices and prioritize what works for you in the trip that you're putting together. So this is how we came to make our decision to spend 1 week in Belfast and 1 week in Dublin. There are a lot of things to do in each city, plus there was good opportunity, or plenty of opportunity really, to take day trips outside each of those cities.
By limiting ourselves to 2 cities, we could limit changing hotels and dragging our luggage to and fro every day or every other day. At our age, that really means something to us.
It does. So let's look how we book the airline ticket. As I said, we were looking at using our airline miles on Delta to make this trip. And of course, we wanted at least Comfort Plus seating.
At least.
For that overseas flight. We researched 2 types of airport. One was a medium-sized airport that is pretty easy for us to get to. And then we looked at a larger hub airport. And we ended up choosing the flight out of the hub airport because of those logistics considerations of how many airline miles did we have. It was definitely fewer airline miles to go out of the larger hub airport, but then also there was a non-stop flight from the hub airport to Dublin. We weren't able to do the non-stop on the return flight. We will have one layover. I think if we would have booked just a week or 2 earlier and pulled the trigger on it, we might have gotten non-stop both ways for the airline miles that we had available for that, but it just didn't pan out when we went to go book. We're not upset that much about the layover on the way back. It's not a difficult one. But we make this point in the timing of making those airline tickets can be critical, and sometimes it's just luck too.
And our layover is actually in Boston, which helps us fit into this whole Irish theme.
It's a Boston shirt on today.
In the past, we have booked several overseas flights using miles. In our experience, it is best to book those miles trips as soon as you can, as far out on the calendar as you can go. A good point to booking with miles is you can cancel and get your miles back. So in essence, it's just like having a refundable ticket.
That is nice. But if you were paying cash, you might want to buy your tickets early too, or maybe just wait and see what happens with the prices. In my experience, though, it is almost always paid off to book early and lock in a reasonable price when you can and when you have flexibility of flight schedules. I find that the later you wait, maybe you'll get a cheaper price, but the schedule may not be as good as if you had just gone ahead and booked. And the other thing is, if you are putting down a lot of money on an airline ticket pretty far in advance, You also want to make sure that you have some method of getting money back if you cancel that ticket, either through a airline's protection program or your own travel insurance program.
Before we booked our hotels, we needed to decide which city we were going to first. For logistical reasons, we chose Belfast first. And as we go along now, Sarah will explain the reasons why.
Like most flights that leave the U.S. to Europe, you leave the United States in the afternoon or evening, and you arrive in Europe the next morning. So our flight is scheduled to arrive at 8 a.m. Unless we booked a night in a Dublin hotel in advance, we would be unable to check into our hotel until, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We thought it would be better to use our time and just go ahead and get on the bus in the morning and transfer to Belfast. And it was also going to work on the back end, because if we're flying back out of Dublin, it will be more convenient to be in Dublin to get to the Dublin airport on the morning of our return flight, rather than being up in Belfast and having to rely on a long transport on the morning of the flight to get back to the Dublin airport. So this all seemed to make good logistical sense for us to plan it that way.
And who wants to get up at 2 in the morning to get on a bus or a train to go back to Dublin to get on your flight?
That's right.
I'd rather sleep an extra couple of hours.
I had hoped that we would be able to reserve both hotels on credit card points, but it didn't end up working out like that. But it's going to still be okay. We were able to book our Dublin hotel with our credit card points. We have the Chase Sapphire Preferred card that gives you good points to use in traveling. So I had enough points to transfer points from the credit card to my Hyatt loyalty account. And there was a Hyatt-centric hotel in the city center of Dublin that was going to look like it would be a good fit for our trip and getting around Dublin. And so I was able to do that week in Dublin on points. Belfast just didn't work out. I tried some different hotels and different programs, but for all of them, I would have had to buy more points, and that just did not turn out to be as economical as just booking a hotel through Expedia. I'm kind of excited to see this hotel in Belfast because it's in the center, it's close to restaurants, a couple of grocery stores, and it has a kitchenette in it, and I'm kind of interested. In the end, we'll compare that hotel room with a kitchenette in it, just booked off of Expedia, versus the value that we get using our points to book with Hyatt in a different scenario type of a hotel. And we'll be able to bring that review to you later.
We made these hotel reservations at the same time that we booked our flights, which was about 10 months out from the trip.
So these were our early planning steps. They seem simple, just book a flight and 2 hotels, but you can see there's a lot of other look forward factors you need to consider in doing that. Even though you don't finalize those steps, you're looking at those options before you lock in on the airline and the flight and the hotels. And again, we did this all 10 to 11 months out so that we could lock in those reservations. We are now beginning to look at our kind of intermediate planning steps of how exactly are we going to get from place to place? What places do we want to see in Belfast, and what places do we want to see in Dublin? And then what day trips might we take out of each place to kind of round out our experience of going to Ireland? And then we kind of have maybe one more special thing I'm going to work on planning is I'd like to go to at least one of the villages of my ancestors and see if we can get there and at least have a sense of where my ancestors came from in Northern Ireland.
And with all of this, so many options, so the planning is going to be not only fun, but it will take a lot of work because we want things to go off as seamlessly as possible on this trip.
Realizing, however, something always goes a little wrong.
Right, but you have to be prepared to expect that and how you'll react to it if it does.
It's part of the fun of travel, isn't it?
It is. If you want to plan a DIY trip, we hope this video is helpful to you in planning all those important factors that you need to know in shaping your trip and the things you need to consider, such as where you are going, how long will you be staying, at what pace will you be making the trip, what time of year will it be, where are you going to stay, and how are you going to get from place to place. After you've decided on these big picture areas, then you can really drill down to decide what you're going to do on your trip.
Because we are part-time travelers and doing all kinds of travel, from cruises to road trips, from local to international, we are organizing our different trips or types of travel into playlists to help you find what you might be interested in. This video is going to be our first video for our Ireland playlist. Look forward next to us bringing you information about how we're drilling down to that intermediate planning steps. While we're planning for Ireland, however, we're traveling around the Midwest this summer, and we're trying to bring you some interesting things from the Midwest, the heartland of the United States. So check out that playlist, but don't be limited to just the Midwest Traveler playlist. We have some other playlists on our cruise, on going down to Georgia, and an interesting video on one ancestry travel trip we made. So we'd love for you to check out those videos and playlists.
If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe and sign up for notifications so you'll know when our newest videos are released. Also, we would love to hear from you. Any comments that you would like to make, you can leave those below. And until next time, we say
Goodbye.